Well, good afternoon. Let me introduce the Excellency Ambassador of the Czech Republic to Italy, Hana Hubáčková. She has been Ambassador of the Czech Republic to Italy and Malta since 2015. In 1988, she graduated the University of Carolina in Prague. After having worked for some years in the Parliament of Czechoslovakia, then the Czech Republic, she represented her country at NATO and served for some years at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From 2002 to 2006, she was Ambassador of the Czech Republic to Hungary, and from 2008 to 2013 to the Republic of Serbia and the Republic of Montenegro. From 2013 to 2015, she was the head of Security Department of the Common Foreign and EU Policy in Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Czech Republic. In addition to Czech language, she is fluent in English, French, Italian and Serbian. Thank you.
I can speak to this one if it's fine. Okay. Good morning. Good morning to everybody. Does it function? It does function. I see. Okay. I'm really pleased that I can carry out this meeting with you. I understand that actually some of you participated in the event that we organized at the embassy just a couple of days ago. In between, I traveled to Torino when I... Does it function? It does function. I see. Okay. So we will really pleased. So can I start from the beginning, I suppose? In between, over the weekend, I traveled to Torino, where I had a very, very interesting meeting at the Torino University with quite a number of students who are engaged in building stronger relations between Europe and Africa when it comes to the young generation. And I think it is a very important activity they are undertaking, and I would like to encourage you to perhaps try to find the web page to look at what was happening and perhaps get connected, because to establish functioning relations between Africa and Europe is absolutely necessary. And I'm saying so also because I'm having in mind the presidency in the European Council that we are currently conducting. And we see that building consensus in Europe is, I don't want to say relatively easy, but it is easy because we are moving basically in the same environment. But we also have to try to find a way how to better communicate the situations, the realities that are currently in Europe to our African partners, because we need them. We need them to understand what's happening. We need their support also in multilateral forums, for example, in the United Nations. Simply, we have to have a better communication between the two continents. And the younger generation certainly plays a very important part of that. I started by saying something that I actually didn't plan. I wanted to tell you just a couple of data about the Czech Republic. I don't know how much you know about the Czech Republic. Sometimes I come across, of course, with the general knowledge, but not the too many details. I suppose, can I ask how many of you traveled to Prague? Oh, okay, fantastic. So it's a part, probably not a majority, but it's a part of you. So Czech Republic is in the center of Europe. It has roughly 10 million inhabitants. We are a very industrialized country, I have to say. Most of our GDP comes from industry. Just a small part is actually produced by services, where we have to do a little bit more than what we have been doing so far, and a small part is produced by agriculture. So most of our GDP actually comes from industrial production. It makes us, to a certain extent, close to Italy, because Italy is also a highly industrialized country. We had, I have to say, prior to COVID, we had a relatively stable growth of GDP, which of course was fundamentally hindered by the COVID period, as it was the case for a number of other countries. Now we are recovering from that, but also facing economic difficulties with respect to what is happening in the East. Therefore, we have to take into account the consequences coming from the war waged by Russia against Ukraine. Slowly, I will be moving to the EU presidency that we are conducting. The EU presidency actually is an enormous task for both the administration and the government. We already have got one experience from 2009. At that time, actually, I was ambassador to Belgrade. 2009 was still, if you study European law, it was still before the Lisbon Treaty came into power. So we were operating this presidency under a different sort of treaty framework than we have been doing now, which gave us at that time a bit stronger role, especially in third countries. The role of presidency in third countries is a bit limited at the moment. It has changed. But still it retains a lot of political importance. And to our surprise, it does retain a lot of importance inside the European Union. The presidency that we are conducting now is especially difficult because of the war that Russia opened against Ukraine. We are operating in completely different geopolitical circumstances. We have to react to something that we had not expected. I think a couple of months ago, nobody expected that the war would develop into the extent as we see it at the moment. And there are very important consequences. There are very important consequences, first and foremost, for Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting for their existence. Ukraine is fighting for their sovereignty. Ukraine is fighting for their nation. And they are paying with their blood for that. And we have to keep it in mind whenever we are discussing the situation in Ukraine. We have taken a number of important decisions inside European Union. I think what is important to say is that European Union has been moving in unity. And when I say in unity with respect to this particular situation, of course, it doesn't mean that we come to the unity very simply by saying, oh yes, we go forward. There are very, I would say, detailed discussions about each and every aspect. And we, through those discussions and through this democratic process inside the European Union on various forums, from the working level up to the level of our political leaders, through this really complex process, we come to the point when we have got the same understanding and can move forward together. Sometimes European Union is criticized by being slow. It is a fact. European has to be slow because it's a democratic construction. It's not a dictatorship. So we have to go through those discussions. We want to retain our democracy. So we have come to the point when the European Union was able to move forward, as I said, in a very strong unity, denouncing the aggression of Russia against Ukraine and taking important decisions, like, for example, granting Ukraine financial support, humanitarian support, but also military support. Military support is important. I know it's been discussed in Italy. It's still a matter of, to a certain extent, discussion, but we appreciated very much the very clear standpoint of the Italian government on this particular aspect, simply because without having the means to defend themselves, Ukraine would simply surrender. Surrendering doesn't mean peace. We all want peace, but peace really doesn't equal surrendering. And we have to understand it in this way. The Czech Republic, as part of Czechoslovakia, you may remember, was occupied by Soviet forces in 1968, part of the Warsaw Pact countries. And it was a very traumatizing experience, which my generation, even though I was small, still remember. I was 6 years old at that time. I don't remember much myself, but I remember my parents. I remember the faces of my mother, of my father. I remember the trauma that the population of at that time Czechoslovakia suffered. The Soviet forces stayed on the territory of Czechoslovakia until practically 1990, when they left. So we were under the Russian or Soviet Union, if you wish, military control for 2 decades. Too long a period of time, I have to tell you. So Ukraine is now fighting. We believe that Ukraine will win, and we have to help Ukraine to win. It's part of the priorities of the Czech presidency. I don't know whether you have got now. Can I ask you to show the slide with the priorities, please? The technician, can the technician show? Yes, can you show? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you have got now a slide which shows you the priorities that the Czech Republic formulated before it assumed the presidency. As you see, all of those priorities are to a certain extent linked to the new geopolitical situation that we experienced. So the first point and the prevailing preoccupation for all of us is really everything that is happening around Ukraine. Part of the difficulties that we have been facing, of course, has been the huge wave of migrants. Ukraine, there was not only a migration inside Ukraine, there was a huge wave of migrants outside of the country. The Czech Republic, which is having a 10 million population, as I told you, was hosting within a very short period of time 400,000 people, mostly women with children, and we had to provide within a very short period of time the housing, the healthcare. Gradually, these people, if the conditions provide, would be also having the possibility to get integrated into the working system, into the labor market, and their children, which is a lot of young children, actually have to be integrated into our school system. And it's just, I'm speaking just about the Czech Republic. Poland was hosting, I think, some 3 million people, again, within a very short period of time. And a similar situation was also in other countries in the vicinity of Ukraine. Now, Ukrainian post-war recovery. Actually, I think we were a little too optimistic at the moment when we were writing it. If we take a look at the situation as it is at the moment, when the Russian forces are actually targeting deliberately civilian installations, energy installations, and increasing the extent of damage already caused to Ukraine. The estimates that I heard some time ago, still before this wave of bombardment, was somewhere around 350 billion euros. 350 billion euros for the reconstruction. Now we have to take the damage that was caused now. So this is going to be a major task, certainly not only for the European Union, but for the whole international community and also for the international financial institutions. But we have to start preparing it. Energy security is again related to what is happening. You've been reading about the difficulties, I think, in the past it is a very complex issue that doesn't have a simple solution. And I see and I read a lot of criticism that European Union was not moving fast enough to be able to address the very high prices that we are paying, both on the part of our families and citizens, but also it does burden our economies. But simply because it is such a complex issue, we need it, and because we are having really dramatically different situations in each of our countries, we have to move carefully to be able, first of all, to address what is needed on an emergent matter, but also not to make mistakes, because we need to establish a system that would function in the long run. So that is both the emergency, but also the long-term goals for the new energy policies. Now, our leaders were debating it again last week. I think they came up with very strong political decisions that are now going to be not implemented, but worked out by the experts in the European Commission and our energy ministers, who are practically for the last 3 months in permanent session. They'll be debating the details and bringing it to a decision, hopefully in November. So by the end of this year, or by the beginning of next year, we should be having a wide range of decisions already implemented, and we should see it also reflected in the prices of energy. But it is a very complex agenda, which needs an expert view. Strengthening European defense capacities. Again, this is to a certain extent related to what is happening in the East, but it's a long-term goal on the part of the European Union, which we have taken up from the previous presidency. But it is amongst our priorities because we think we really need to do a lot. There is a new strategic concept that was approved by the European Union. There are a lot of tasks included in it, and also a lot of goals still before the end of our presidency. So we really are working on that. One of the outcomes that we would like to see by the end of our presidency is a new, let's say, document that would be dealing with a deeper collaboration between European Union and North Atlantic Alliance. We know that we have not been ideal, that collaboration has not been ideal in the past, and we need to move it forward because we are having the same security situation we are facing. Strategic resilience of European economy, again, something very closely related to what is happening now on geopolitical scene, but not only, I have to say, there are a lot of elements that we have to take into account with respect to economic resilience. There have been negative impacts in the past from, let's say, an attractiveness of markets that were pretended to be economically more favorable than the economic conditions in our countries. So we really have to be looking at the complex issues related to economic resilience and again, move forward. And the last, but not least, really, resilience of democratic institutions. Here we speak about the rule of law, here we speak about the protection of journalists. I mean, here we speak about the soft power of the European Union, which is, however, very important. And that's very important part of why the European Union is attractive to our citizens and why it is attractive for the countries that are still outside. There are a lot of things that are not included in those 5 priorities and on which we work. We work, for example, on artificial intelligence, very important agenda for the whole European Union. We work on the whole Green Deal, of course, taking into account the energy situation at the moment. There have been voices saying that we have to slow down to a certain extent the progress on the green agenda, which, however, we have to be very careful about, not to slow it down completely, perhaps take into account the situation where we are at the moment, but simply not to give up on the goals that we have set for ourselves in the green transition. We work on migration and asylum package, which is again a large agenda inherited from the past, trying to find the right balance between solidarity and responsibility, and a lot of other issues that are really included in the work of the European Union. I think this presidency will not be forgotten, simply because it is such an exceptional experience. I see a lot of focus on the part of the government. I see a lot of focus on the part of the administration. We are having very experienced people working in Brussels in our delegation to the European Union, because the major workload, I have to say, is really on our colleagues who are working in the delegation in Brussels, and on our people who are working in various departments in the Czech Republic. But we are trying to do our part of the work. I think the presidency should not be pursuing a national goal of the countries that are bearing the function. The presidency is here for providing the space for solutions, for trying to find consensus. And this is what we've been trying to do. And I think I will finish here and as an introduction, and give a chance for answers.
If you have any questions, please raise your hand.
Good morning, Your Excellency. My name is Francesco Monstidor. I'm a student of Global Governance at the University of Tor Vergata. My question is, on a national level, what were the sources of energy for the Czech Republic before the war, and what is the energy agenda of Czech Republic right now? And what is the position of Czech Republic on the price, on the gas price cap in the European Union? Thank you.
I think I'll deal with this one first, and then we take other questions. I mentioned it very briefly when I was speaking at the beginning. There are really very different energy situations in each and every country, so we have to take that into account. There is a different infrastructure, there are different locations, there are different sources of energy. The Czech Republic, being in the center of Europe, doesn't have any connection to sea, for example. So we are, to a certain extent, disadvantaged in terms of finding alternative sources and alternative ways. We are dependent on the others, on the infrastructure that actually leads across the other countries. And in other words, we could say we are at the end of the line, whether it is gas or oil. So if the oil or gas is consumed in the countries through which the infrastructure goes, we would be finished up with having nothing. Therefore, the solidarity that we have agreed now, especially now in the course of the debate of our leaders in Brussels, is so important. We have, of course, tried to diversify, but it is limited. We are diversifying through some of the LNG ports in the Netherlands, but it's a relatively small amount of resources. We are also trying to increase what is being delivered through Italy. I mean, the pipeline that goes from Trieste, it is an important line of energy resources for us. But also, I have to say, we are having nuclear power plants. So a large part, as opposed to Italy, for example, where a large part of electricity is produced from burning gas, there, again, our advantage lies. We are having nuclear power. I know that Italy renounced it, doesn't have it. It held, I think, 2 referendums for actually refusing this source of energy. But for us, it is a very important source of relatively cheap energy resource, which we need to keep. I mean, it's absolutely strategic for the Czech Republic, for example. So we work with that. We work with finding alternative sources. but we are certainly not at the end of the work. We have to continue. We have not still solved it 100%. No, we have managed, for example, now to secure the energy supplies and the gas supplies for the next winter. It is very important. I mean, like everywhere in Europe, we have been fulfilling the storages as fast as we could and as well as we could. We are above, I think, 98% of fulfilling our storages. So it is reassuring for our public and for our economy, but we have to go on. I mean, we are not at the end of the war.
Good morning, Your Excellency. I'm Manuela Lenori and I'm a GG2 student. I wanted to know more about the priority that artificial intelligence has for the Czech Republic. Thank you.
I have to say, artificial intelligence is not my cup of tea, so it's very difficult for me to go into details, but I can tell you that it's been taken up very actively by the people who are responsible for it. We are moving towards a general legislation inside the European Union, which has not been adopted as yet, as I know. My colleagues are saying they are pursuing very good and very constructive discussions with the European Parliament. It is called trilogues, and they have to do it prior. Actually, it is a legislation is suggested. So they are trying to find what is called a general approach towards this particular piece of legislation, hoping that at the moment we would hand over to Sweden, which is the next country in the trio. France was first, Czech Republic in between, and then Sweden. We would be able to say that we have come to a decision on the general approach on the legislation which relates to artificial intelligence. So it's part of the work. It's definitely one of the important subjects that will shape our future. So it's not something that we would abandon, but we try to move it forward.
Good morning, Your Excellency. My name is Paolo, and I am as well a GG2 student. And my question is a bit detached from the other, because it refers to the role of culture that has historically had Czech Republic as a capital of the literature and also general culture of Middle Europe, Central Europe. And my question is also related to the fifth point that we see here of resilience of democratic institutions, because of the role that, for example, had the President Václav Havel in the first place with the Velvet Revolution, and then as actual President of Czech Republic. And I wonder, what's your opinion on the role of a president that had a past as a playwright and then a writer, opposed to today's? We have also in Italy we have very subsequent technician governments and economists. So I mean, what's also how could, for example, Czech Republic implement this role of culture in the objective of reaching resilience? Thank you.
No, thank you very much for this question, and I did not mention it, but the whole Czech presidency actually is conducted under a slogan which is called Europe as a task. Europe as a task. Rethink, rebuild, repower. The first part, Europe as a task, it's actually taken from a speech that Havel gave in 1996 in Aachen, when he spoke about and reflected upon the role and future of the European Union. And I think, as always, he was reflecting upon what we can be doing for European Union rather than on what the European Union can do for us. Just, it's a different perspective. I mean, what each of us can do, and each of us is having a moral responsibility to do everything we can to move this project forward. he was also mentioning that nothing is guaranteed, actually. Nothing is guaranteed. We cannot take things for granted. And I think it's one of the lessons that we are all also learning now. Nothing can be taken for granted. We have to fight for democracy. We have to be aware of the values we stand by. Havel was a great champion of human rights. It was nothing artificial for him. He experienced it in the course of his life, being a political prisoner for a long time, on numerous occasions, actually. He was writing about it still before he became the president. So that was something that was in him. He didn't have to develop it, and he really transferred it to the Czech society. So human rights and defense of human rights and democracy is something that we have inherited from Václav Havel and that we cherish with a great respect. Not every time we are ideal, we know it, but it is very important to be aware of the importance of human rights and democracy, and really to think about what we can do, not what the others can do, what we can do, and also what Europe can do for other parts of the world. And he was saying, and I think he was right, we cannot enforce what we believe in. We have to bring it forward through being a little bit of an example. Not ideal, of course, we know it. Our societies are no ideal, but still, we are democracies. Our rights are guaranteed. We have judiciary that functions. So it is something that is very, very important. Also, the role of intelligentsia, the role of journalists is extremely important. So the complex of our societies that are linked together in the European Union, I think, is the substance of what we cherish very much. And Havel was really a person that we continue to keep as an example for us. Moral example, an example who behaved in the same way, being a dissident, behave in the same way, being the president. And I think it is, again, some sort of a moral message.
Good morning, Ambassador. My name is Gaia, and I'm a second-year student of global governance. And since you mentioned that Czech Republic uses nuclear energy, I wanted to ask you how the government deals with radioactive wastes. Thank you.
Radioactive waste is part of the energy security policy. Of course, we have to have plans for dealing with it. My husband actually is a nuclear physicist, so I should know just by talking to him. And he participated in the construction of the second nuclear power plant, actually, in the southern part of the Czech Republic. It is a complex, technically complex agenda, but there are two ways of handling nuclear waste. One is that you have got depots, short-term depots, where you put the waste for a certain period of time, and then you have to develop long-term deposits, where you put what is left from the previous one for basically the rest of the time when the substance is still radioactive. It has to be, these depots need to be and must be technologically extremely well prepared, and there is technology for that. The advantage of nuclear waste is in the very fact that it's a relatively small amount. So you really can confine it within a relatively short area, location, if I can put it like that, under a very strict control. If you take into account all the various ways that we are having by whatever sort of production, it's an enormous amount of waste which is left without being observed, without being controlled. When it comes to nuclear waste, it is put into deposits which are technologically prepared for the purpose and which are under continuous control. And it was really by chance, I was on a holiday in Hungary. We have rented a hotel, and then I discovered that actually it's very close to a nuclear deposit, this short-term nuclear deposit, and you would not notice it. It is underground. There is a small table, there is a small house where there are people who are guarding it, but you don't notice it. It's very, you know, it's a big concern for everybody. I understand it. I mean, it has to be kept under control. But you do have radioactive waste also from other productions. You do have radioactive waste from the services of hospitals, for example. So it's not just nuclear power that is producing nuclear waste. There are a lot of other productions that are actually, and you have to take that into account when you are dealing with it. And it's one of, I have to say, it's one of the areas where we are having a very good collaboration between the Czech Republic and Italy, because we are providing, in a way, an assistance, because we kept the nuclear energy knowledge. We are having a university, a technical university, producing people who are well-trained, well-educated for the purpose. So, and we also keep the knowledge, know-how for dealing with the waste. So we are helping Italy to arrange the necessary conditions for dealing with the radioactive waste on the territory. No, not yet.
Good morning, Your Excellency. I'm Davide Cirella from Global Governance student. As you were saying before, before COVID, Czech Republic experienced a stable economic growth, but I think it's different from economic growth in other countries because economic growth was spread among all the population. So nowadays, Czech Republic is one of the countries with least inequalities throughout the population and with lowest unemployment rates. What is the secret of this formula and how can this be applied to developing countries which should experience this growth too?
I don't know whether we can be a good example for developing country, and I mean it without any sort of second thought, really. The fact is that we inherited, Czech Republic inherited a well-developed country industry-wise from the past. I mean, Czechoslovakia, if you look into the time of the first Czechoslovak Republic, which means after the establishment of Czechoslovakia in 1918 until the time when we were occupied by the Nazis, Czechoslovakia was one of the most industrially developed country in the world. So we did not have the need to a certain extent to rebuild everything, to develop everything. When we started in 1989, when the communism fell, we really could establish our functioning on something that was relatively significant. We had to change, of course, fundamentally, the centrally controlled economy into a market-based economy, and that was a task which was certainly a major one. But we succeeded relatively fast. We were lucky. I think the system was introduced in such a way that we succeeded within a short period of time, and we could start functioning under the new conditions already at the very beginning of 90s. So we didn't lose any time at the beginning. I think it was perhaps an important point for the economic success that we have registered after. But I don't know whether that could be an example for a really developing countries, because their situation is specific. There are enormous structural deficiencies they have to deal with. There is an enormous poverty. I mean, the governance sometimes is really rather weak. So the conditions they have to deal with is, to my mind, really different.
Good morning, Your Excellency. My name is Raul Elia, and I am a second-year GG student. I have two questions. The first one is related to the fact, do you think that the recent event that happened in Slovakia, which was a terrorist attack outside of a gay bar, could also affect Czech Republic minorities? So on a national security level, also for minorities, do you think Czech Republic is doing enough, or is willing to do more, or is doing less? Just a general question. And a more personal question related to your career. This speaker mentioned the fact that you've been an ambassador to the Republic of Serbia in 2008. And my question is how it has been working in Belgrade in the year in which Kosovo declared itself independent, with Czech Republic recognizing its independence after 2 months, so in May 2008. Thank you again.
Yeah. Okay, on the first question, I think we never do enough. I mean, we have to keep it in mind. We have to be aware of still the risks of negative reactions, sometimes that go beyond the acceptability in the society. There was a strong reaction in the Czech society towards what happened in Slovakia. I mean, our societies are still very closely correlated. There are a lot of Slovaks living on the Czech territory, and simply the two countries divided in such a way that we never had any kind of gap between the two of us. So there was a very strong reaction to it. There are a lot of Czechs in contact with their Slovak counterparts. I'm sure we will reflect upon it. I mean, no society is immune. Let me put it like that. No society is immune. So I don't know. I don't know whether there will be any particular act taken, but also in terms of, let's say, addressing the issue in the society is important. The way how it is addressed in the society is important. But I have to tell you frankly, I think the Czech society, I mean, is relatively tolerant. Doesn't have any. I have not registered. Perhaps it's my mistake, but I have not registered any act that would be any closer to anything like that. I would say the tolerance is important. It is there in the society, but perhaps again it may not be taken for granted. On the second question, Kosovo. It was a very particular period to be in Belgrade, a very particular task for the Czech Republic that actually accepted the independence of Kosovo. But it was a matter of taking the reality into account. I mean, Kosovo wanted to develop as an independent state. There was history linked to it. Of course, the history is complicated. The history is complicated in the whole Balkans, I have to say. I mean, it's so easy to get into very complex issues when you are working in the Balkan region. You see that even now we are not having the issue between Belgrade and Pristina resolved finally. It's still being under discussion. It's still being worked through. It is still being negotiated. European Union works as a contributor, mediator in the bilateral discussion, but they have to bring it towards an agreement themselves. We cannot do it on their behalf. It's very important. I mean, for the stability of whatever sort of arrangement there will be at the end, they have to do it themselves. They have to do it between Belgrade and Pristina. But it was very interesting to be there at that time.
Good morning, Your Excellency. I'm Tom Maggiotto from France. According to the third point on the slide, one of the priorities of Czech Republic's presidency is to strengthen Europe's defensive capacities. As a French citizen, I was curious to know how much does Czech Republic support French President Macron's project of a European defense community, and with especially the creation of a European army. Thank you.
I think to a certain extent the dilemma that we used to have is a matter of the past. And I think to get over this dilemma, it was the Russian invasion into Ukraine that helped us to get over that. And I think the dilemma was more ideological than a matter of substance, to tell you the truth. I think everybody knew that Europe needs to improve its defense capacities. I mean, years ago, we knew we have to improve it. But some countries were a little bit more concerned by the fact of not weakening NATO by improving the European defense capabilities. I think this debate, to my mind, is over. The United States are clearly, expecting Europe to have larger capacities, large defense capacities. I mean, they expect us to be able to act also in the current situation, and we know we have to do it. So I don't know whether we will be having a unified army. Even NATO doesn't have a single army, of course. It's always an army of individual member states. But the ideological dilemma is a matter of the past.
Good morning, Your Excellency. My name is Fabiana Neiva, also a Global Governance second-year student, and my question is related to how has the Czech Republic balanced the goals of the nation and the ones needed for the presidency, and if the ones of the presidency have left the national developments behind or in a second plane. Thank you.
You know, we like to say we are a middle-sized country. Being a middle-sized country meaning that you have to be realistic about your aspirations. So when we were thinking about what we can do in the course of the presidency, the role for us is really to provide the space for consensus. I think it is also the right role for each and every presidency, by the way, but anyway, for the Czech one, this was the right role, and I think we are, at least according to what I hear, doing relatively well. We are still having 2 months ahead of us, but the whole system functions, as I said, even though we are dealing with incredibly difficult situations and agendas, it is functioning. And through that functioning, we are also pursuing our national interest. I mean, our national interest is really to deal with the refugee crisis. Our national interest is to achieve energy security. Our interest is to have a better European defense. Our interest is to have more resilient economic European economies, and our interest is to defend the functioning of our democratic institutions. So we are not differing from the interest of the whole European community, I think. I mean, it's if you will, the trick. We concede, we have got an agreement on what we have been doing in the European Union. It's absolutely in our interest. It's in the interest of all of us to work together on those issues.
Good morning, Your Excellency. Thank you for your speech. My name is Emiliano Zovato. I'm a second-year student at Global Governance. And my question is, what is the plan of the European Union to increase its own production of high-tech technology like microchips, which are getting more and more important? Thank you.
I probably didn't get the question correctly. I don't know whether you could repeat the substance of it.
If the European Union has a plan to increase production of microchips.
Microchips, yeah.
Thank you.
It is a very important question, actually. I'm learning about it a little because we are all dependent on the production of chips, and we know that the production is elsewhere. It's not in Europe. So we have to keep on addressing it. There are plans for production in Europe. I think the major producer is in Asia, actually. It's not on the territory of Europe, also in the United States. But we are all dependent on the production of chips. I mean, practically all the technologies are using it. So yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, Europe has to, as we decrease the dependency in energy deliveries, we also have to decrease the dependency on the production of chips elsewhere. And we also, I have to say, we also learned it a little bit. I mean, the necessity to decrease our dependency in the course of COVID time, when on something as simple as the mascherine, we were dependent on deliveries from abroad. How can this happen to Europe? So we really have to think about those dependencies that limit also our liberty to act economically, act also politically. So we have to take that into account, absolutely, and move forward on that. I agree with you.
Unfortunately, we are running out of the time, so that was the last question. On behalf of Global Governance students, I wanted to thank you, Excellency, for sharing with us your reflections that I believe will be crucial for our academic and career decisions. Thank you.
I thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to meet you. Thank you very much for the questions, which reflect the fact that you are really well informed, that you are student and the right disciplines. And of course, I wish you a lot of success in your studies and in your careers. That's really important to have this new generation, I mean, full of hopes and energy, I mean, going into practice. Thank you.
Guys, come in, please. We have to talk to you for a minute. Can you sit down? Just, it's 1 minute. It really, so we have some issues with the next events by night. Can you come? Because I don't remember all the details. So the problem is that the events of at Terrazza Civita and the event at Villa Magistrale, so the ones of tomorrow,